Welcome to the webinar series being hosted by Eureka in partnership with TICE. And our theme for today is At Home with Learning. We have a very interesting panel for you all today. Let me start with Mr. Arun Kapur, who is the director of the Royal Academy in Bhutan. He's also the founder director of Pallavan Learning Systems here based out of Delhi. He has over 40 years of experience in the education space. He was the founding headmaster at Vasant Valley School and till very recently even the director there. And he's the author of the book Transforming Schools, Empowering Children. Then from Bangalore, he's joining us from Bhutan right now. Out of Bangalore, we have two people. We have Nooraine Fazal. Nooraine is the co-founder of and the CEO of Inventure Academy. She started out in the corporate world, IBM, Reuters, all over in US, UK, some Middle East countries, and then came back in 2003, I think, to set up Inventure Academy. She wanted her voice, to be one of the citizens with a say in how things are developing in our country. Then also from Bangalore, we have Anurag Behar. Anurag is the CEO of Azim Premji Foundation. Anurag is also the Vice Chancellor of the Azim Premji University and the Chief Sustainability Officer at Wipro Group. He's been on many councils and bodies, with government and industry, including the National Mission on Teachers and Teacher Education, and member of the National Education Policy. And Dr. Shelja Sen. Dr. Sen is the founder of Children's First, the Mental Health Institute, also based out of Delhi. She is an activist and in the space, and really, wants to work at like a catalyst to get a lot of people together for this, building emotionally safe spaces for inclusive and creative learning. And that's what her book, No Child Left Invisible, is about. So thank you all for taking time out for joining us. And thank you also to the large audience that is joining us. I can already see over 500 participants there. Thank you all. This is all, to the panelists. These are people who are teachers, school heads, parents, even some students. And we just hope that the connectivity stays stable over, this session. So coming back to, the theme for today, At Home with Learning, when we came up with this theme, there are two ways we are looking at it. One is, whatever has been thrown at us, this post-COVID, during COVID, world that we are living in, is about learning at home, or online learning as we are calling it. How is it impacting the children? What is happening? The efficacy of it, the impact of it. Are there implications? Could there be things we can, look at? And in the second part of the conversation, at home is about how do we make them a little more comfortable with things? What are some ideas, together we could co-create and talk about things we could do to make this a little easier on the children, effective, to engage them, to keep them motivated. So the format, there's a question answer session, audience, around 12 o'clock for all of us. So please keep your fingers nimble for the keyboard. But before we get to that, the format is that we will have 3 or 4 minutes for each of the panelists to share their views, around the impact first. So what may the children, or what could the children be going through? What is happening inside? Are there some things to be concerned about? Are there some things that can be managed better? What are the views of the panel members? Once we do that, then we will get on to the second part. And for this, I would like to start with you, Dr. Sen. We read a lot on WhatsApp and the forwards and what I call the WhatsApp University pop psychology stuff that's been doing the rounds. So it may be interesting to hear from someone who knows what may really be happening in the head. So what could be happening in these little minds? What is of concern? What is good? What could be the kind of implications? So over to you.
Good morning, Gaurav, and good morning to all the panelists and everybody who's tuned in. When we're talking about impact, I think it's very important to keep in mind that impact is different for each and every child. Depends on the family they're from, how safe they are in the family, in terms of the age of the child, the income level of the family, the profile of the child. A child who has a disability, the reality of COVID would be very different for that child, or a child who's very introverted, or a child who's very sporty and likes to be out and playing. So for each child, it's very, very different, and also the region the child is from, right? So I would say that on the whole, we have to look at the whole thing. It's a very varied landscape, if I can say, for each and every child. Having said that, I'd like to share something that a 12-year-old told me. And, I like to believe that I'm not an expert. I always like to keep away from that label of expert, that I'm a curator of the know-how of the children and young people I work with. And she said something to me, and it stays with me. And she said that her father had lost a job recently because of COVID. And there's a lot of tension at home. She had lost her grandmother last year. There was a lot of family conflict, marital conflict between parents. And she was talking about the level of anxiety and stress at home. And she said, the stress at home is like polluted air. It's affecting everybody, but nobody really acknowledges how much impact it's having on each and every person. My parents are so lost in what they are facing, the struggles, and all their stress, all their anger, all whatever's happening at home is coming out on me. And that stayed with me, and it's so important, and it's made it like, I heard somewhere that COVID is somewhere the X-ray of our times, and it is X-ray of our times. And sometimes it's children who are bearing the brunt of it. They are like the sponges who are soaking in all the stress at home. A lot of times the stress at home is being dumped on them. I feel very concerned about children who are at home where they are not safe. So we're talking about safe at home or learning at home. What about children who are not safe at home, who are being abused at home? We know the calls to helplines across the world have been very, very high. So, there's like a tip, I would say a triple jeopardy that we have to look at. And the triple jeopardy is, first of all, children themselves cannot label, especially the younger children, small children, what's happening to them. If we say the stress is like polluted air, they can't name, they can't label what they're going through. So that's the first. Second is, parents are so caught up in the stress and anxiety, and the caretakers or parents, whoever they are, that they're not able to really take care of their children. And third jeopardy is that our system, our society is not trained to prioritize children's needs, especially children's emotional and mental health needs. And we think they're okay, we think they're all right. And most of the time, children, when I'm talking to families and parents, think, children are okay. And it only takes me a little time to spend with children to really find out the impact is. Now, the impact is different for each and every child. For little children, it's different. For older people, it's different. Now, think about young people, 17, 18, who are used to so much of autonomy, being out, living on their own, or, in colleges, and now suddenly all the spaces are collapsing, right? All the identities, roles, everything is collapsing. Parents are working at home. They are, everything is at home. Kids are at home. The schools are at home. Colleges are at home. In small spaces, they're all stuck there. And so young people are reacting in a different way. They're shutting themselves up, or they need their space, or they're sleeping through the day, or children are becoming cranky, angry, and we are focusing on the behavior. Parents complain about he's not talking to us, he shuts himself, or the kids are, oh, he's so clingy, or he's so angry all the time. We have to understand that's the way children are showing what they are going through. So we get stuck on the behavior of the children, but we have to understand what's happening behind. And I'm not in any way blaming the families, because, like I like to say, each child is wired and inspired differently. And similarly, each parent is doing the best they can with the resources and skills they have. It's a tough time. And parents are not being supported right now in the way they need to be. So, it's something, I'm so glad we're coming together as educators, as people who work with children, to talk about something so important today.
Thank you, Dr. Sen. And that's really, I think, opened up this whole conversation. And I'm very tempted to, pull in Mr. Kapur for a question based on what you just said. Mr. Kapur, being in Bhutan, a country that talks so much about and takes pride in the gross national happiness over lots of other parameters. How has it been there? Has it been any different? I know the country locked down pretty quickly, and the COVID has been contained in a sense. But you were mentioning that schools have been shut there too. So what the point that Shelja just made about different cultures, backgrounds. What is your experience in Bhutan? What is happening there? Are there some parallels? Can we see something how they may have handled things to learn from that?
Okay, so thank you for that, and thank you for having me on this webinar. I was listening very intently with what Shelja was saying. Very important points she's brought out about the. But I just want to put on to the table also that this has been a very trying time, not only for the students but also for the teachers, because there's been a very steep learning curve for all teachers. So because I'm kind of involved, sitting where I am here with many different kinds of schools, whether it's schools like residential schools like the Doon School, I'm on the board, we keep looking at what's going on over there. There's a small school, day school in Rajasthan, which is a CBSE K to 12 school, looking at what's going on over there. And then your question about what's happening here in Bhutan, where the Royal Academy, which I'm part of, is a grade 7 to 12 school. We've reached grade 11 at the moment, and this grade 11 will go into grade 12 next year. So as said His Majesty, and the government reacted really fast and sealed the country down. So there's not been any community spread of the virus. We have just below 50 confirmed cases of, but they've all come from outside, because lots of people, a lot of the Bhutanese came into Bhutan from the Middle East and from Bangladesh and from India, from America, and they all had to go through a 3-week quarantine period, and all the cases that are there at the moment were tested and found in the quarantine period. So they've all came in from there. So having said that, but the reaction has been quite fast in terms of the kids went home around the middle of March, like what happened in India also. The kind of children that we have here is very different. And again, I'm going to kind of go between India and Bhutan, because children are children, wherever they are from. And I'm going to draw a little bit of a parallel between what happened in Rajasthan, so a lot of kids here in Bhutan are in geographically locations, where some of them, they don't have, very few such places. There are some places like this where there's no internet connectivity, right? So to get to them was a bit of a challenge. But then there are also some children who don't have access to the kind of equipment or hardware that is required to get on with online kind of learning. So this learning at home, or at home with learning. And just to bring in this aspect that I'm been talking a lot about is my 5 areas of development that I feel very strongly that in most schools, and unfortunately also in the learning at home or home learning or online learning, a lot of emphasis has been given to the cerebral side, to the academic side. And for me, the physical, the social, the emotional, the spiritual side is as important. It's not just add-ons to the cerebral side. So all the stuff that we have been doing is keeping in mind those aspects. So even if we have been reaching out to children and the teachers, because they're also under a lot of stress, because suddenly in Bhutan, at the Royal Academy, I have teachers from America, teachers from Brazil, and they're stuck here also, Bhutanese teachers. And even with the Doon School or with Jhalawar. So sometimes the topic that we're talking about at home with learning, here in Bhutan, if you just want me to talk about that aspect, they're at home, and their homes here because they were not locked down in that they could not go. So it was much easier to deal with these things. They got back into working with the family, working on the farm, helping the parents with the cattle, going out and collecting firewood, just getting into sync with family. And that, actually speaking, is true education. The problem is we think that because we are running some educational or schooling institutions, and this is another point that I keep talking about. I think this has been in many ways a blessing if the kids have been able to have access to spend time away from schooling institutions, which make a distinction between, I make a distinction between schooling and education. Unfortunately, the world over, we've become an over-schooled and under-educated society. And this has been an opportunity, I think, for us to look at what learning means, you know, and then therefore learning, breaking out of the boundaries. Now, if I just talk about learning about your emotional strength, you're learning about your social strength, your physical strength, your spiritual strength, your cerebral strength, and they all need to work together. And I think this is an opportunity that has come on our table for all of us, including people sitting, the fact that we are having this conversation with, like what you said, over 500 people logging in from all over. We've got people from Bangalore and Noida and Bhutan. How do we respond to this? And if we are struggling to kind of come to terms, you can imagine what happened to both the teachers, the parents. Parents are sitting in. And what I noticed was that the role of the parents with the children and the partnership that they were forced to do. And I think that's what one of the things that Shelja said, that if there were tensions in the home in which you were locked in, then it went to a completely different space. But if the parents and the grandparents themselves were emotionally stable and socially stable, then the whole atmosphere in which you were learning became completely different. And it was also an opportunity in many ways to use technology to individualize the reach that we could get to. Some of the stuff, because of technology, we were able to do individual catering to children, to their needs in all the 5 areas. But at the same time, it was an opportunity to open up what we were doing to many other people. So difficult for me to kind of distinguish. So I hope you got the point that in Bhutan, it was very different, that because the lockdown was not as severe as what happened in India. So for a lot of the children, the education actually happened back at home. We did have online classes for them, but this was blended with what they were doing with their families back at home.
All right. So,
and just to...
I'll take you again on the opportunities piece a little later, because I just wanted to bring in Nooraine and Anurag. And very interestingly, you know, the points you made as you know, give me interesting opening for both of them. So Nooraine, you know I'm aware of how you have been, you know, working and what's happening in Karnataka, what's, you know, your school being at the forefront. You've tried to use this online platform and ways to do it, you know, the best way with the best of intent. What is your experience? What is you? I think collected feedback from users and parents, and you know, you've heard that some of the things that are working. What has your experience been? And then I'll come to Anurag, which again with a question that what Mr. Kapur said sparked. But let's hear from Nooraine first.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come here and discuss something so critical and important to all of us. I think it's fair to say that this is unprecedented and there's no rule book, there's no playbook for any of us here. We're really doing the best that we can. Dr. Sen and Mr. Kapur really covered a lot of the issues and the challenges which parents, children, and teachers are experiencing. But as I was sitting here, I got a WhatsApp. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it. It says, "Good morning all. I hardly could sleep yesterday after the parents' session, as I only have the voices of little ones ringing in my ears, who are asking when their classes could start. I could see the concern of the parents and anxiety in their eyes. The learning of our children is like medicine. If not given for one day, they would regress by 10. So this is really in response to the ban which the Karnataka government has rolled out, at least for the next few days, until they have an expert committee which comes together to figure out what online education should be like. This, of course, 3 months after many schools already rolled out online learning in response to the lockdowns and in response not to be able to go on campus. So I think one of the things this has done is really magnified the opportunity gap in India. Mr. Kapur touched on it as well briefly. But, you know, I think this is sort of adding to the stress levels. And like Mr. Kapoor, I also want to talk about what teachers are going through. We literally had to go transition overnight, right? And teachers across India, and I think across the world, have truly embraced this opportunity to use technology to stay connected with students. That social connect, that emotional connect, and yes, of course, cognitive as well, academics, beyond academics, and so on. But they've really risen to the challenge. But the thing which is really contributing to stress is, I think, the negative perception of private schools in the country, the regulatory environment. Every day there's something in the papers about, you know, ban online learning because it's very challenging for parents who are at home or juggling work and home or don't have devices. There are things about if schools are closed on campus and you don't have online learning, let's stop fee collection. So there's a high level of job insecurity. And there are reports on a daily basis again of schools being forced to shut down because they don't have admissions, or less than 30–40% of their parent body is actually paid fees. So that's one stress. And of course, two, it takes a lot more time to get things done in terms of prep time and so on. But I think the positive of that is a lot of teachers have used this as an opportunity to really reimagine education and to provide more project-based learning, more interdisciplinary learning, far less focus on syllabus completion. I mean, hey, we're in a world where board exams were canceled around the world, year-end exams were canceled. Children, I think, you know, it's fair to say they are the ones who are facing the brunt of it the most. They're voiceless, not the ones who've been emailing me saying, ma'am, please start classes. We're really missing our classmates. We're missing the teachers. But they very much, you know, as Dr. Sen said, they're feeling that lack of routine, the lack of connect. And I guess the other one big concern is just if their family situation, if the situation at home is not good, then what happens? Because particularly in Bangalore, we have a lot of nuclear families, and the RWAs have been very stringent in their enforcement of social and physical distancing rules. So I think all in all, a challenging situation. But what I'm very hopeful about is I think we all are in, you know, I think this is a very good painting to have here. We all in the same storm, but of course in different boats. And hopefully we will come out of this stronger, wiser, and more connected as a society. Thank you.
Thanks, Nooraine. So, Anurag, I mean, good. I've kept you at the end of, you know, the panel for this comment. I think I could see, because I read what you write in your column. I've, you know, had some conversations. What is your view? So, you know, I understand, you know, you being on other, you know, panels and other stuff. You know, there's one overall long strategic view about the government and all. But in terms of, you know, just boiling it down to children first, we'll come to that point a bit. With children, what do you think? What do you feel? You know, as a thinking person, you know, you've been in the education space. You've been in, you know, government council for teacher training. What is it that is critical to focus on right now? Need of the hour. There could be strategic stuff, but currently, where is the pain point right now, according to you?
You know, since 1st of April, I have been to 13 districts in Karnataka. So I've been traveling a lot. That's unusual in these times. Most of the days in Bangalore also I'm out. I have roughly 1,500 of my colleagues similarly in different parts of the country on the ground every day with communities, with children, with teachers, right? So there's an India that I see, and I think that's most of India. And that India, the first thing about that India is, you know, all of us are saying it's unprecedented. Yes, it is. But the basic issue is there's no food. They don't know what's going to happen to their livelihoods. Farming is demolished completely. Those who are in the lower middle class are dragged into poverty, right? The number of so-called migrant labor, you know, it's funny that we call our own people migrants, but migrant labor. Estimates vary between 30 million to 50 million who have gone back. So if you if you take most of India, that's the reality. Huh? So in that reality, as I've been arguing everywhere, let's not talk about education right now. There's no big deal. I've been saying that, that even if kids don't go to school, we don't do anything about their education for a year, it's okay, right? Because that's the reality out there. And
if I may, just to that point, I mean, is it this versus that? I mean, I'm totally with you what you're talking about, right? But if we have to say where it can be, I mean, it's not. It's, I know I've had this argument very often with friends that, mothers say, don't waste food because, there are hungry people there. And a lot of smart kids then say, but, how is this food going to reach that kid, right? So can the two things go on parallelly? I mean, I'm with you on what you're saying, but is it all the same piece?
Yeah, but Gaurav, the thing is, you are with me. It doesn't mean that most of the people are with me, right? So this has so much of hogging of the media and these kind of spaces about the matter of education and how do we restart schools. I think that's totally unreal, totally unreal. So I think the first point is, I think we need to absorb this reality, right? And that doesn't mean that, kids who come from our kind of homes, they are not facing another kind of reality. Of course, it's like Joanne Robinson said about India. Anything that you say about India is true, and its opposite is also true, right? So, but let's recognize that this is the real India. This is a large part of India which is facing this. That's point one. Point two is, and again, as I said, I've been traveling a lot. When I travel, I actually go into villages and I go into these small towns. See, let's say kids are very happy. Huh? Lots of kids are very happy that they've had an extended vacation. Yeah? So it doesn't mean that some kids are not unhappy, but it doesn't mean that lots of kids are not unhappy. Right? A lot of kids are very happy. They've had extended summer vacations. They got no. And there's a very large percentage of kids who have no time to be happy or unhappy because they've been basically acquired into the labor force, right? So, this matter of how it's affecting kids, of course, like Shelja said, depending on each child and each child's circumstance, things are very different. And I think that's, that's perhaps the most important insight about this matter, right? But I think it's also important to recognize that, again, if you look at our large country, children's reactions and the situations are very different. And to my mind, as much as we are, and we must be bothered about mental health issues of children who are, let's say, in abusive homes, we should also be equally bothered about, I would think, millions of children who have really been, let's say, acquired into the labor force, right? And because of the livelihood issues that I see over the next few months, very hard to get them out, right? So all I'm saying is, Shelja's insight is, I think, at the center of it. And having that at the back of your mind, one should remember that children's reactions are very, very, very widely varied. And now I'm not, it's not just for the sake of saying this that I'm saying that. Let's say last week I was in a village somewhere in North Karnataka, and the children are thrilled. We got 4 months of holidays. Wow! So I think that's the second part of it. The third is that now, given this reality of this country, right? Given this reality of this country, we should also, and that's why I've been arguing that let's not focus so much on education. The third key part in my mind is that online education doesn't work. And when I say online education doesn't work and it's completely ineffective, I don't mean that, it's ineffective for the kind of children who might be going to, the kind of schools that my children went to or your children went to, or the kind of schools that Arun or Nooraine have run, right? Of course, like what you said, Gaurav, that it could work, it does work for a certain set of children. But if you look at the large majority of children, and large majority of children, whether they're going to government schools or private schools, it's a mess, absolutely. I mean, because of this whole thing, we did a survey across the, let's say roughly 50 districts, and there's a pretty large swath of the country. The kind of students that are dealt with by the government schools and what are the low-cost private schools. About 45% of homes had smartphones. Those 45% smartphones were basically with the head of the family. The kid had no access to it, right? Of course, let's forget about connectivity. And this is just a very narrow slice. Access means nothing because if you don't have a place to sit and do anything, right? So online education, of course, it's very useful and should be used where it can be used. But the idea that it can be used is for the wide population of students in this country, I think that's completely unreal. That doesn't mean that online stuff cannot be used by teachers, and as I've seen with thousands of teachers, cannot be used by teachers to remain engaged with their students, right? So if you distinguish these two things, let's call it curricular learning, curricular education, and children engagement. It's very good for children engagement, and I've seen scores and scores of examples where it has been useful, effective, right? And but curricular learning is something altogether different. So
okay, I hear you, and yes, I mean we'll get back to maybe towards the end to get some suggestions, ideas from you, what can be done. But before we just shift gears a bit here, reminder to the audience that 12 o'clock onward we will start taking questions. Please, try and make your questions sharp and based on some of the stuff you're hearing, or if it's relevant, keeping the theme in mind. And if you could also name the panelists who you may want to respond to your question, that will help us just segregate the questions. So I think I hear you, Anurag, and yes, there are both sides to it. But let's look at, one example, analogy we keep using, this broken, car, trying to change the tires of a running car. Now I know not by design, by default, unfortunate that the car has slowed down. The question to all of you is that, what are some opportunities? These moments can be used to reflect, redesign, rethink some of the stuff, without the general pressure that we have. Who would have thought that exams can be, done away with for a year, for some other reason? It's just happened. So Mr. Kapur started talking about opportunities. I think Nooraine touched upon it. Anurag, you said some stuff around that. So back to Mr. Kapur, that was very interesting. I like that children going back to the farm, doing practical stuff, that could be some, education there. So Mr. Kapur, what would, and again, we'll maybe 2-3 minutes, but this we can keep like a conversation of, you all also responding to each other. What are some of the opportunities that you think, we should definitely not miss out now that we have this little window to start thinking of how we've done things over so many years, if not a century?
Okay, so I would like to start off by making that distinction between schooling and education, right? That's a very important distinction that needs to be made. What Anurag said, that they become part of the labor force, but the kind of children that I deal with also have always been part of that. They were taking time out, whether it's in Rajasthan or in Bhutan or in Bihar, where I also work in the area. They would be part of the labor force and also have to come to school, right? To come back and work, help their parents. So now what's happening is that if we are reaching out to adults, teachers, like what was also mentioned, that to engage, keeping them engaged, we also need to understand that the large number of children are very resilient. We adults need to understand that their resilience and our resilience are of a different quality. And a lot of the stress that we take on, we shouldn't assume that they also have that same. And a lot of the stress that they have, which we quite often we don't understand. So there is a separation in the adult, and I think this was mentioned by Shelja and everybody, that there is this whole spectrum of the kind of people that we are dealing with. I think the opportunity here is to create a community of learning, right? Which includes everybody. And when we tried to segregate and put into silo that schooling is the only place, or school was the only place where any learning took place, I think that's an opportunity for us to break those shackles and understand the huge opportunity that there is for our young to learn from wherever they are, whatever stress that they are. And what do they learn? Is it just the academic side? You know, and even in the academics, we have also gone and created silos that, you know, you learn your physics separately from your maths. And so this is an opportunity also to break out of the silos in academics. So there's a silo of academics that there's an opportunity to break out of and learn from whatever it is that you're doing, wherever it is. And within academics to break out of those silos of learning mathematics separately from physics, separately from chemistry, from history and geography. So that's what the kind of stuff that we're doing here at the Royal Academy also. So just to relearn for ourselves what learning actually means. And that's when I was talking, your tagline is very beautiful, at home with learning, right? And that learning now needs to break away from schooling, right? And whether it takes place at home, on the farm, when you taking some cattle into the forest for them to graze, whether you're helping your dad in the shop that he is running, mom in the kitchen, whatever it is that you're doing now is an opportunity for us to reclaim the learning space and break out from schools. That's my take. And therefore, if we as adults, it'll be more difficult for us labeled teachers to let go of this than for the students and children to take on the fact that they're learning all the time, right? That for me is the opportunity that really is existing. And when we use online, and I think what Anurag said very clearly was that online could be used to stimulate the adults. And then they take that into the lives of the kids. Because here also, we have lots and lots of, even in Rajasthan, where the school that we function. And if the fact that he mentioned that, you know, and I also mentioned that earlier, the equipment, you know, whether it's a smartphone or a laptop or whatever it is that you're receiving it on, the connectivity is also so. I think the connectivity across the country is about 13% or some very small amount. It's not even 20%, right? So even if you do have a smartphone. But there have been times when in the little village, when we have reached out to the children, and we've seen a whole bunch of kids sitting together around a machine. I mean, we've seen goats and cows at the background. And it's not just reaching out to the kids of your school, but of all the kids in the neighboring place. And you reach out and you reach out to them, not only about maths and history and geography, you reach out to them about a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's my point, my basic point. Break out. Here's a chance to remove the shackles on schooling and bring in all aspects, bring in, you know, the non-silo aspects, become at home with learning. I love that point. And I think we should stick to that and use this opportunity to understand that schooling is not what it's all about. Learning is what it's all about. Education is, and in all 5 dimensions that I talk about, is where it's very important. It's easy to say, but not so easy to do. But it's an opportunity, like you asked, it's an opportunity. And if you miss this opportunity, then it'll be really, really sad. And I think the kind of work that the Azim Premji Foundation in the university and all doing is, here's an opportunity for them also to completely break out and lead the way for us to learn from them, because they have an opportunity, they have the reach to do some of these things that we can only think about.
Thank you. Nooraine, I saw you raise your hand, sorry, before Mr. Kapur came. I don't know whether you wanted to respond to what Anurag had said or your views before I go to Shelja and Anurag.
Unmute myself would help. I completely agree with what Mr. Kapur is saying in terms of we really need to separate schooling from, you know, we shouldn't confuse schooling as the only way to be able to get an education or learning. But that said, it's a safe space. And I think people have sort of come to terms that you send your kids there. This is not to say that you can't educate or learn anywhere else. I think you should absolutely be able to learn anytime, anywhere. I see technology really as an enabler. And I think it was Vajpayee who said, there's an India and there's a Bharat, and we really need to bridge that divide. I don't think we should say, okay, 13% connectivity, and therefore we shouldn't do anything about it. We should expect the government to provide connectivity in the same way that you get electricity or water. It should be a public utility for everybody, right? So I really wanted to say that. And I don't think a one-size-fits-all approach is okay. I don't think it's okay to tell kids and parents who worked hard to have a certain opportunity, or people have a certain mindset to say it's not okay for you. And I'm not saying Anurag is saying that, but the government is doing that right now, and that's simply not all right. They were basically caught napping, or maybe they thought it's not a big deal if kids don't go back to school. Now, I work with some government schools in Whitefield, and also we bit with Parikrama, or at least have exposure to them. And they really cater to children from the kind of backgrounds that Anurag was talking about. And yes, they only have one smartphone in the family, and that's generally the head of the family. The head of the family comes back home at 8 o'clock. The teachers are actually recording video classes. They're sending them assignments, if you like. We've also photocopied the assignments. So when they come in to collect their rations, when they come to the school to just connect with each other, they're actually given this work. So my point is, there are models that are working. And we should embrace that in the same way that we embrace it as an opportunity to learn at home or from your community, right? So that's really what I wanted to say. And I think this is the time to really partner with each other, to have a more enabling vision for education, where we have a more sustainable society, where we're more entrepreneurial, and really have more enterprising, an education which really equips us to be more enterprising and to fulfill our potential and really contribute to the world being a far better place. We really need to change our paradigm of success for schools. And that's something which Inventure really set out to within, to the extent that we could push the boundaries, but plus more. It has to go beyond syllabus completion, board exams, getting into good college, getting a job for life, because as we've learned now, that answers to what we're facing are not in a book. Right? So we really need to be educating children to be far more collaborative. I mean, I'm not going to get into the 4 C's. I think we all know that, but we really need to be creating those kind of learning opportunities. So we run a change maker challenge at school. We run a youth parliament at school. Kids have been involved in trying to revive Vatur Lake, in drafting the child protection policy of Karnataka. So there are tons of opportunities even within the schooling space. So I don't think we should be throwing out the baby with the bathwater here, but really figuring out how we can enable learning anywhere. So that's kind of sums up what I wanted to say there.
Yeah. Before I go to Dr. Shelja, because I think with her, I would be more, be interested for our group to talk more about opportunities at home and as parents. So before that, Anurag, what is your view on the opportunities, or what is the big picture thing that this the slowdown or stoppage as we were looking at gives us time for thinking or doing?
I'm not very, right now I'm not very optimistic about anything. So I don't see many opportunities.
That's why we chose a panel, so that we could have all kinds of views. So I'm glad we have that view on that. So please go.
Yeah, I really think that we can talk about opportunities for a certain category of students, families, schools, right? For a very large percentage of this country, there are no opportunities right now. I think we should recognize that. Having said that, there is a certain kind of a structural opportunity. And what I mean by the structural opportunities is the following. And that's true of India, it's true of other countries as well. I think there has been a very stark recognition in the middle class, upper middle class, that schools are actually providing parenting. schools are actually the institution of schools, the institution structure of the education system, that really is quasi-parenting. If I were to say it in even simpler words, the upper middle class is realizing that we've outsourced parenting for 7-8 hours, right? So it's not only the expansive definition of education that we should use and schools should try for. It's not just that, but just the fact that the kids go for 8 hours and 9 hours to a school, and therefore the school sort of takes care of them, right? I think that's we should not miss the importance of that realization. It has many kinds of implications. One implication is that, and these things, they may work, they may not work, but this is the kind of a situation one has to say, look, invest more into schools. So when you've been talking about, our country investing, I'm talking public investment of under 3%, do you realize now that the country is outsourcing childcare to the education system? So 3% might be your education stuff, put 2% because of the childcare, right? So I think there's a fundamental structural realization that can be leveraged upon. Now, how much will it work? I don't know, but it's an opportunity. Now, there's another opportunity. I would say an opportunity and an obligation. This recognition that schooling, of course, with the most expansive visioning of education, I think it's important for schools to understand that they are playing the role of parenting, right? And I mean, the two schools that I know, Nooraine and Arun have done that, but it's a very small number. It's a very small number who takes the responsibility that, look, when I call it a school, actually, I'm the child's parent for 8 hours, right? And not just 8 hours, because my influence goes on beyond the 8 hours, right? So what kind of a school should you be? What kind of capacity should you have? Who are your teachers? What are their capacities? What are their dispositions? How do you run the school, What's your school usually? So the entire enterprise of a school, once it understands and recognizes that this is not merely about physics and mathematics, or even about, physical development, it's really about parenting. You would be obligated to change yourselves fundamentally, right? So I see that as a structural opportunity. Like I said, it's an opportunity. We'll see what happens.
Thanks. Shelja, I made a very powerful point about, how the kind of home you come from, or the background, the economic strata, what's happening at home, would make a difference to the impact that we were talking about. But, I know the three of them talked more about in school and with the education piece, but at home, what can parents do? Is there some opportunity, because I know when the first lockdown version 1 happened, and I think everyone was thinking 15, 20 days and the government will contain it and things will go back to normal. Everyone thought it was a nice opportunity for families to connect and you to dabble in whatever, you had missed your little bit of cookery or whatever. And then I think, you can only pretend for a little time, and in some time, everyone was back to normal and even pulling their hair out at some time. But what is there some opportunity for homes, families, for us at the personal level with this kind of thing to connect better with each other, to support our children? What can parents and teachers do? Some practical stuff that we can do.
Gaurav, before I answer that, or I attempt to answer that, can I say something? Because a very interesting discussion was happening before this, and I would like to say a few things on that. Yeah. So, we were talking about success, the concept, the notion of success. We were talking about changes. And I think I would like to step back a little. And, it's so important for us to really look at, it's a very important time for us to look at our culture and how much we applaud this culture of hustling, hoarding, competing, the business culture, right? And this business culture and this whole problematic notion of success. And I think that is one of the biggest problems I think that needs to be deconstructed at this, I mean, has to be deconstructed every time, but at this time, especially now, how much it's harming our kids and how much it's harming our planet. And I think this is something, and for me, you were talking about, how Anurag was talking about how schools end up playing, outsourcing parents outsource parenting to schools. Similarly, sometimes parents also come to therapists to outsource parenting, so sometimes we are not only just parents, even schools do that. We are expected as therapists, I'm expected as a therapist to collude with the culture and make the child successful, right? So my child is not studying, take the child to a therapist, and the therapist will make sure the child studies well, is successful. My role is very different. As a therapist, my role is to make, help. And I believe that children and youth are not passive recipients of our wisdom. They have immense skills, abilities, know-how, if we ask them. Sometimes we believe we know them, we know what to do, but you ask them. And I think what we need to do with our children and young people, we're all adults here thinking we know better. But sometimes we need to ask them, right? Ask them, what do you think of this idea of success? And you find every problem we have right now. We talk about parenting, we talk about mental health, we talk about education. It comes down to this problematic idea of success. The single way a child needs to be, there is a treadmill culture that we have set for our children and our youth, and we believe everybody has to follow that. And I think this is a good time for children to start asking these questions, young people to ask these questions. We have to, because they are wired to ask, right? They're wired to challenge, they're wired to resist the dominant discourse of what is the right way of living. And we need to do that. And what do they really want? What is they, we are going to go away. What do they want? What kind of, like most young people will say, you messed up the world for us. And that's true. And who are we to tell them that this is the way you should live your life? Who are we to tell them this is the way you need to deal with COVID? We have to ask them, what do you want? What dreams do, and if you talk about, saving the planet, who is actually leading? Children are leading this, right? If you talk about issues of anything, it's about disability, it's about gender, it's about sexuality, it's about race, it's about anything right now which is important in the world, apart from COVID, which is being discussed around, or issues of, the class issues or caste issues, young people have a lot to say, right? So sometimes we have to ask them, and they will help us to find a better way rather than we telling them what to do. So I would like to step back. Sorry, I feel very strongly about this, especially when adults go on and on thinking that we know better. We don't know better. We messed up the world for sure. So having said that, I think it's important for us to also think that the memories of this pandemic are going to stay with us forever. And they're going to stay in our children's lives forever and young people's. And we need to be aware what deposits are we making right now. Is that, for when I talk to parents and there's a lot of thing about what do I do? He's not attending Zoom class, or he's not brushing his teeth, or he's not, first thing I tell the parents is, really what really matters right now. This tug of war, drop the rope. I mean, this is not the time for them to be learning a lesson of, you need to learn this lesson, you need to learn that lesson. There are big things to be discussed right now. And, there's a lot of conversation about survival of the fittest. I think, and that's kind of wrongly attributed to Charles Darwin. Actually, he never said anything like that. It's right now, the way the humanity has survived over millennia is because of the kindness, the survival of the kindest. And I think that's what we need. The biggest lesson that children and all of us need right now is to be kind to each other. And Nooraine beautifully put it that we are in different boats, but we are in the same storm. And I see in my role as a therapist is how to, when I say children are I'm a narrative therapist, so children are not talking to me, they're talking through me. Through me means only one way of healing right now is how they are contributing. If you have come from a privileged background, how are you using it? You know, I have children who are working with me who have started fundraising for laborers or for the Didis in the colony or for the press wala in the colony. And that's the, you know, they have come up with such amazing ideas on that. So I would say that right now, this basic issue of Zoom classes and not taking a bath, sleeping at this time, getting up at this time, not eating nutritious, that's, you know, put away. And I think right now what we need to look at is a bigger picture. And what is it that, and of course, having said that, I would also say that because children sometimes their emotional needs and mental health needs are neglected, and they don't have spaces outside home, where can they go to sometimes a dadi or his house or school counselor or certain teacher they have a connect with, that how do parents need to keep their eyes and hearts open to be there for children, to listen to them, to understand, you know, to let go of this regimented lifestyle and to let go of the notions of this is the right way. We have internalized so much of that judgment or this is the right way to live. Like a mother recently shared with me, she's a single mom. She has a child with autism and she really struggles, but she says, I'm so relieved right now that I don't have to go out with my child, because everywhere I go, school, teachers are complaining. I go to a mall, I go to a shop, the shopkeeper starts complaining. Everybody is complaining about my child. He's like this, he's like, and at home at least, there's no judgment for me. There's no shame or guilt. It's a struggle for me, but it's difficult. It's easier for me. So yes, that is very important, that how, you know, we live such an individualistic, we are going into that Western thing of very individualistic model of a neoliberal individualistic, and we need to move away from try to collectivize. We have to see all of us are in this together in a way, different boats, and how we can contribute in some way or the other. If that is the way we can see moving forward, I would say yes, we have a, you know, Anurag very rightly said that he's not optimistic. There's a difference between optimism and hope, because optimism comes with certain level of certainty. This will happen. Hope is, you know, hopefully things will change. And my hope is with the children and the youth.
Thank you, Shelja. Okay, folks, before we throw this open for questions in a couple of minutes to our audience, from each of you, very sharp and maybe two things, if I can ask you, that what would your practical advice be? What do you think is something you'd want to recommend to parents, teachers, school heads, whoever you wish to? Two things on your list. If I was just saying, hey, you know, I hear you, whether hope or optimism or, you know, not so much hope and optimism. What would you say, hey, here are two things if you focus on, we, even being in different boats, you know, can face this storm more easily. Anurag, let's start with you this time.
Gaurav, advice to who?
This is to our audience, right? So I think they've been listening to us patiently. There are teachers there, school heads there, parents there. What would your words to make them, you know, say, hey, of course, we are all facing this together, but hey, here are two good thoughts. If I could do this, focus on this, try this, for themselves, for their kids, teachers, whatever. That's the audience that we are addressing. So they will be throwing some questions at us. So before they do that, what would you say to them?
The first thing I would say is what my son or daughter would say. Take a chill pill, you know. So don't get so fussed about all this education and stuff like that, you know. Take a chill pill. The second is, 200 years later, 100 years later also, this time will be remembered. And this time will be remembered not because we did online education or did not do it, right? It will be remembered because of what people are facing. So I think go out there and do something. Right?
And is there a do? Okay, I mean, we're all at different levels and, different access to things or positions that we have. But to the audience at large that we have here, what would you say that do something? What would that something be, Anurag? If I can maybe pin you on that a bit.
Sure, just cross the street. Just cross the street. I'm sure you have a slum. I'm sure you have an auto driver whose savings are completely vanished. Figure out a way to help him, right? So it's not distant. And it's not like that you have to be like me, traveling across the country, even in these times. Just walk the street. Where I'm sitting here, 1.5 kilometers from here, there's a Rohingya camp in Bangalore. Right? Just walk out there. So it's just go out. You know, Gaurav, how much I run, huh? And I ran 350 kilometers in May. I've never done that before. I wrote about it this week. Huh? So I never stop in my running. But throughout May, I stopped every day during my run because I'm just seeing people walking, and where they're walking to. They're walking from Bangalore to Jharkhand, Bangalore to Orissa. Just stop, ask them, give them some money if you can. Right? So there's just lots to do. Just get out, That's what I'm saying. On one hand, for yourself, take a chill pill. Don't worry, things will be okay. Maybe you'll catch COVID, maybe you'll not. But on the whole, things might turn out to be okay. Go out, It's a staggering crisis for most of the people around us.
Thanks. I know that the post that you mentioned or the piece that came out in Mint about Hindustani, even I read that, very powerful. And yes, I hear you on that. Nooraine, over to you. I think you've tried something, I was seeing your school website, this challenge thing that you're trying, and lots of things, some practical stuff that, again, I know there are diverse view here, and we are, again, not saying this or that, but within the online piece of continuity in school that you are trying to manage, some things that have worked, with positive impact, what would you suggest to the audience?
I think give everybody a voice. Give students a voice, give parents a voice, give teachers a voice, and know you're in this together. Since you touched on it, we ran a Change Maker Challenge. We have a program which we've been running for the last 4 years. And this time we threw it open to communities across the world. And we had over 100 communities of students come together across South Asia and Gulf. And the question is very simple. What would you do to reimagine schooling or education? And what was very good was, as Dr. Sen said, and Anurag's been touching on as well, is that the kind of things that the student came back with, they came back with things like, we need to do something for children who are less privileged, who are deaf, or who are studying in government schools or studying in rural areas, and they don't have the same access to technology that we do. They believe that it's important for them to continue to have access to some form of structure, some form of community which the school brings for them, so that they don't slip into child labor. So that was really great. And also they had a lot of ideas in terms of that schools should really bring the wider world to them. More engagement, more opportunities to work in areas beyond what you normally have inside the classroom. And what we did was we really worked step by step with the children. They've come up with ideas themselves. They working on something with women's empowerment or girl empowerment. They're working on youth empowerment, again, identifying problems that they can solve. They've got a peer buddy program for students or who are kind of struggling emotionally. So yes, I do think that this generation will remember this. It will have a tremendous impact on them. And I'm hoping they'll remember it in a way that will actually help them do something about all the challenges that Anurag has been describing. But at the same time, I think it's important for them to take care of themselves. It's important for their families to take care of themselves. It's like in an airplane which is about to go down. You see visuals that you give yourself an oxygen mask and then help the person. So I really think that we need to take care of ourselves as well. And so yeah, go out, get outdoors as much as you can. In Bangalore, we're still fortunate enough to be in a position to do that, meditate, read, learn, chill, do a combination of the things, get some me time, get some bonding time. Sorry, that's more than one thing, but I'd say overall, make sure you're doing okay holistically and also help those who are in need. So this is your opportunity, as I said to our students, this is your opportunity to be a hero. Now, for a 6-year-old, that may mean just stay safe and understand that your parents are also going through their challenges. For kids in middle school and senior school, it could mean that they're trying to identify the kind of world that they want to grow up in and what they can do within their community to contribute towards it.
All right. Mr. Kapoor, before we take a few questions from the audience they're already coming into me, I've been with you in some sessions when your 5 key areas you talked about, the holistic learning, spiritual, cerebral, social, spiritual, and some resistance I could see from even very educated parents around this, it's marks and school. Now that this is what we are facing, what is some, what are some ideas or suggestions you have to really look at those things a little more seriously, or whatever else your advice to the audience would be? You're on silent, I think, Mr. Kapoor. You're on, your mic is.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just saying that this is something that I have lived through also. I do a fair amount of work and learning. When I, for 9 years, I used to go spend time in Tihar jail, as you know, working with kids from the age of 16 upwards, working with coolies in the INA market who are in the same, many of them being in some same socio-economic background, and some were in conflict with the law and some were not in conflict with the law. What was the difference with that? So just, the thing is that what we are trying to do is trying to draw one kind of scenario over all the children. And I feel very strongly about this, that all of us, everybody on this panel itself also, and all the parents and teachers, all of us have very, very definite special needs. Okay, there's a whole spectrum. We are all on different points of that spectrum. There is nobody who does not have special needs. So that what that need is needs to be addressed very, very clearly. So there is some people are very high up on the needs. The degree of difficulty that they have in their lives is very high, and quite a few people don't have that degree of difficulty. But there's nobody who does not have some degree of difficulty in their lives. And quite a few of those difficulties are covered, I think, in the 5 areas that I talk a lot about, whether it's your social development, your emotional development, your spiritual development, your physical development, or your cerebral development. And it's not static. The potential that all of us are born with some potential, and actualizing your potential is what living on this world is all about, right? And how do you actualize that potential, whether you are in a school which has almost all kind of facilities, or you're not in a school. There's a large number of children in our country also who are not in school. But that doesn't mean that learning doesn't take place. And that doesn't mean that learning should not take place. And in what format does it come? So for me, it is an opportunity, and I use this word very strongly. It is an opportunity for us to relook at everything that's happening in our learning spectrum. So if I just go back to that idea that all of us have special needs, that some of those special needs, and they're not dynamic, they're not static, they're dynamic, they keep changing from your social status to your economic status, which could be quite different from each other. How do you deal with it? It's an opportunity for us, all of us, to have a relook, very clear look at what is happening. And this whole thing about schools being quasi-parents, that's been there forever, right? Whether we call it that or not, but that's always been there. Whether we acknowledge it, whether we label it or not, whether it's outsourced parenting. And if it is outsourced parenting, then we need to be making sure that all aspects of parenting are taking place by the school, not just the academic side. For me, that breaking out of the silo of academic being all it means when you use the word learning or you use the word education, for me, this is the most important thing, that there is break out of the silo of understanding that schooling is only about marks in a school. It's not. It's about learning. Learning is about your social development, your emotional development. Because when you come out into the world as an adult, as an emerging adult, or as a young adult, or as a fully grown adult, as a 32-year-old, as a 6-year-old, that is what we need to understand. We don't function in silos. And here's an opportunity for us to break out of those silos and understand that all 5 areas of development are absolutely crucial. Whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent, you're a neighbor, you're a sibling, whatever aspect that you are living with as a human being, understand and be aware of your special needs and be aware how you can help other people with their special needs, whatever degree they may be, whether it might be manifested as a child who has Down syndrome, but it might be manifested as somebody who has emotional needs, which are not overtly visible to other people, but they all exist. So my advice, if you're saying to the parents, is to everybody just take a look at yourself. Where are you? Who are you? And how? And not just reaching out to people across the street, but reach out to yourself. And I think that is what was said also. And then reach out to whoever you can to help them be the best version of themselves. And first, be the best version of yourself. And only then, I mean, there is no other pathway that can be designed or designated that, this is the right answer. There is no right answer. Circumstances change, situations change almost momentarily. So at that point of time, in that slice, what's the best that you can do from wherever you come from? And don't think that anybody has all the answers or even has any of the answers. Look for yourself, look at yourself, and just look at yourself in its complete holistic. My other thing, which I want to take this opportunity, just the word holistic that came across. Everybody spells it HOLIST. The spelling of it, because HOLE is a hole in the ground. While we're talking in holistic, is a WHO. So this whole fight I have with, if you can't spell that word right, how are you going to get it right? So as long as you keep spelling it HOL, which means a hole in the ground, we need to move away from what it actually means is a WHO, a holistic development. And
WHO, and that's a different conversation.
No, मैं तो WHO में जा ही नहीं रहा हूँ, WHOLE में जा रहा हूँ.
All right, thank you. And I think questions are pouring in. I've got lots of slips that my team is passing on to me. So, a bit of the agony aunt column kind of time. And I'm also, audience, I know there are lots of questions coming in, and I'm going to try to club questions together. And trust me, for some of them, as Mr. Kapur just said, there may be not one correct answer. So I'll throw them open to the panel. But just to let you know that we are not ignoring the questions. The first one that I'll take, and there are lots of questions around the fact that what will happen this year? Will it be declared a 0 year? If exams don't happen, what will happen? And before anyone from the panel wants to respond to that, my response is, I don't know even if they know, because there is a lot that's happening with different boards in the government. But any of you, if you would like to throw some light, if you have some information, because people seem to be really, a bit anxious about this answer. Mr. Kapur, Shelja, Anurag, I don't know, Nooraine, if any of you, Shelja may not be, but the other 3 may have some information.
I could have a shot at it, but it's not something which has been keeping me awake at night, I must admit, because I don't believe that the purpose of going to school is syllabus completion or to sit for a year-end exam. That said, I believe CBSE, ICSE, they're all thinking of cutting down the syllabus, cutting down the academic year, as it were, particularly because they recognize that there is a divide between the opportunity gap that we've been talking about. The international boards, Cambridge, I believe yesterday said that they're not going to cut back syllabus. So it really depends on each person's circumstances, I guess, each school, each board. But I would not be obsessed, as much as I want our students and every student to have the ability and the capacity to go to school, be it online or be it on campus, particularly to keep that social emotional connect going, to have that sense of purpose. I am not obsessed with syllabus at all. Much rather we focus this time to learn from what's happened and hit that reset button to really sort of reinvent, reimagine. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for all of us. And I'm really hopeful that we will learn from, what we're going through. I may not be very optimistic, but I'm trying to remain that way. Because I do believe we need to stay positive and not to let the situation get the better of us.
Anyone else would want to respond to that? Mr. Kapur, Anurag?
I can just add one thing, which is that this is true for state systems. The state systems are also trying to figure out a way by which they are not just sort of cut down the syllabus, that's one part, but the other also is how do they figure out a situation where some parts of the states, the schools are open, then there's an outbreak, which will happen, and they will shut it down, right? So ordinarily state systems are used to session starts for all schools in a state on a day, ends here. But it's quite clear now that you'll have sporadic outbreaks, and therefore the flexibility to be able to respond in different geographies has to be there. And I think that's different states are at this moment struggling with the states that we deal with directly.
Sorry, to that I would like to add that they're looking at launching Doordarshan channels as well. But I think right now it's more focused on content. The hope is that there will also be some activity-based learning which goes with it.
All right. The second one, Mr. Kapur.
Can I just come back here for a minute, Gaurav, on this, just taking off on this. Mentioned that, that there is this syllabus and the curriculum and the content that needs to be dealt with. The problem is that, again, for me, whether the exam will be held or not held is really, it might be an issue for people who are finishing school and then going into university. What happens to that lot? But the ones below that, I don't think it should really make a difference whether you finish or not finish. So there is this very smaller segment of people who want to make the transition. And a lot of people, if you're taking the whole country as a whole, there are not that many people who are going to go on to university, but the small slice, I think for them, it's a bigger issue whether they finish grade 12 and then get into university. But coming back into this content thing, and then again, another dikkat that I have with this whole content is that we are all so obsessed with the content and CBSE and state boards and everybody else, is that if our whole, again, my idea of education is that if your education is completely content-based, and the way things are changing so fast, that if what you learn is changing as fast as anything else. I think we should be also concentrating and learning on processes, how to learn. That if I get and understand how to learn, then what to learn doesn't matter that much, because what I learn today is going to be obsolete in a very short time. And if my whole schooling is making me content based and the content becomes obsolete, I become obsolete, right? But on the other hand, if my education is getting me to learn how to learn, then it doesn't really matter how fast change comes, because I will always be able to know. It doesn't matter whether I'm a farmer, and how do I learn to become a better farmer? What is happening? The things that are changing. The climate change is forcing me to look at different ways of producing stuff on the ground. So change, and everybody knows, change is the constant, is the only constant, and you say that quite often. I just want to go back into this, that something that you have yourself stood for, and you've been quite, escaping all these things, that you and I and a lot of other people have talked a lot about the methodology of learning and the organizations that you run. I think that kind of learning, here's an opportunity for us to break out of that. And while the question is that 0 year and whatever else, that the actual, what has started off me to talk about this is that yes, in the transition period from school to university, but for everybody else, it doesn't matter. For that small slice of the population, and I don't know what percentage it is. For everybody else, it's an opportunity to break out, right? And the breakthrough that we are requiring, and the 0 year, I hope that if the examination boards cut down the content this year to deal with whatever it is that they want to deal with, it'll be really sad if they add it back next year when things kind of come back to some kind of normal. If they're going to cut out some stuff, then it should be cut off permanently, because obviously they themselves are acknowledging that this is not so crucial.
It's interesting. Lots of questions for you, Shelja. And again, I'll try and club them together, in fact, one question came when Mr. Kapur was talking about being a better farmer, and I think it's closer to being a better father. So what are some things, at home people could do to emotionally connect better, bond better with their children? I know you've said things in parts, but maybe the audience just wants a sharper thing. Some things, and again, I know there are different things happening in different homes, but generally, if some tips or techniques for parents to bond better, connect better with their children.
So, if you're talking about, again, age of the child matters a lot, but if you're talking about younger children, the emotional climate of at home depends a lot on the parents, right? So again, what Nooraine said, you need to take care of yourself. Parents, we need to take care of ourselves. If I'm stressed out, I am not sleeping well, and I am feeling very frazzled and exhausted and snappy, irritable, snapping at my kids, obviously it's going to impact the kids. So first thing is we need to take care of ourselves as adults. Second thing I would say is very important is, like I said earlier, let it be. What Anurag said, take the chill pill. It's right now, it's about, not getting caught in the tug of war that, my children need to sleep at this time, or they need to eat like this, or they need to study like this. We need to let go of those, expectations we carry from our children and let it be. Third thing I would like to suggest is something beautiful, it's a movie that everybody would have seen, Avatar. How did Navis greet each other? And this is something I like to, I love to talk about with parents. They greeted each other with saying, I see you, and it's such a beautiful idea. I see you, because in our present day distracted world, yes, we are not going out, but we are as distracted, as frazzled as ever, distracted by our screens, distracted by our jobs, distracted about the work we have to do, is to be able to find time to be with our children and being there 100% when we can tell the child, I see you. The message to the child is, I see you. Now, think back about the child, and to all the parents here, think back on your childhood and think of one person, it could be a grandparent, aunt, uncle, parent, teacher, anybody, who every time they saw you, they kind of lit up, just as if a light had kind of switched on within them. It showed in their eyes. If you can give that I see you to that child, that'll be very, very powerful. That's, emotional connect somewhere starts with that active recognition. It's not praise, it's not anything, it's just I see you. The other thing I would suggest is empathizing with the child. It's not easy for them. Sometimes it's, like parents say, oh, he's not able to do this, or whatever the child is expected to do. Sometimes we have to learn to be empathetic. We have to be compassionate to our children rather than focusing on their behavior. Try to understand where it's coming from. So that I see as very, very important. And give them choices, ask rather than keep telling them all the time. We keep telling our children, lecturing our children, advising our children. Ask them rather than telling them. And a very simple way of communicating with children I like to talk about, or any kind of communication actually, all ages, is you, me, we. So if there's any problem, it's about screen use, it's about the child is being rude or not sleeping, on whatever the issue might be, sit down with the child and then listen to the child from your heart rather than just waiting for your turn. Try to understand, try to be empathetic, try to be compassionate and understand the child's point of view. That's the you part. You might not agree with it, but you listen to the child. Then it's me, you put your perspective, and then you reach some kind of a negotiation, or some kind of a solution together, so that and they learn an important skill of communication, that, it's everybody's voice is being heard in the family. A lot of things we can sit down and discuss them rather than we telling the children all the time. So these are some practical ideas, again, not from me as an expert, but from parents and children I work with.
So interesting what you said, and that reminds me of something a friend once said. He said, my best way of connecting with my child is on FaceTime.
Yeah.
And I said, what? He says, yeah, because that guarantees that the child is not distracted with anything else. Because when the phone is what you are using to.
Yeah.
So on a lighter note, I thought of that. But to all of you, if I may ask one question that is, again, a common question across people in some shape, form, or manner, is that, let us say the net classes, and again, at home with learning, that was one part of, what we thought on the theme that if this is to happen, how to, get the best out of it. People do understand, with whatever number of hours in a day we get, involved with screens. So one question to all of you around is, how do we detox from that? So Anurag, you run, I know that is your therapy for things, right? So others may have other tools, but what would you recommend, because it's not that kids finish classes for some time and then they don't have others. What would the recommended way or suggested way, as parents you may have done it, or this is a question that may have been thrown with you when your teachers were thinking of the overload of the screen. What could some suggestions be to detox? One is just lock the phone and the computer, but like Shelja said, we have to listen to the kids, and if we have to, are there some other ways?
Yeah, for me, the most de-stressing way is to cook. I think cooking is just amazing because it kind of focuses you, but it also, you're cooking for others. So it's a very good combination of de-stressing, because creating something new, something wonderful out of whatever ingredient you might have, it's not necessary. But at the same time,
I'm just saying that's what I thought. But cooking is also happening with a YouTube video going around of it. So
but that is up to you. But I'm just saying that when you bring a different kind of love and compassion and sharing, that is also a very important part of the cooking part. It's a good combination of distressing yourself, but at the same time creating something for somebody else. So that bridge comes across for me very strongly. That combination of me and anybody else, and at the same time see change happening because of you, a positive change. Of course, if you burn the food, it's a separate issue, but otherwise it's a nice positive change. I think that is a very nice de-stressing way, I find.
Nooraine, I'm sure you are prepared for this, because if the way you are seeing things practically, maybe a lot of advice on this. Or what would you tell parents to detox them post classes?
I think it really varies from person to person. So find that thing which you love doing and where you can sort of lose yourself. For some, it's sport, to the extent that one can go out. I think, as I said, Bangalore is still okay, so you can do that. It's to meditate, it's to read, it's to connect with friends. I think, leave Netflix out of it, because we don't want more screen time now, do we? But yeah, it just varies from person to person. But I do believe that true happiness comes from really contributing, as Mr. Kapur said, to someone else. So, what I recommended to kids is just to find a lockdown buddy, someone they can connect with, someone they can talk to, share their concerns, share their aspirations, even share their goals if they have any, which I don't think is a bad thing to have, by the way. But for me personally, it's been golf, it's been yoga, it's been just hanging out with our school's therapy dogs. Need a lot of therapy thanks to the government. Couldn't resist that one. And really just connecting with my colleagues, friends, and family. And I think that would work for most people. So yeah.
Anurag, other than running, what would you recommend? I think Anurag has dropped out.
Okay. We lost you for a minute, Gaurav. Oh, was Anurag dropped out as well?
Anurag also seems to be off. But Shelja, anything what you would recommend for the detox?
There's a lot of talk about IQ and EQ. There's there's what I talk about is PQ, how we all need playfulness, which is much more important. And working with children, I'm a biggest campaigner for playfulness. I think in present times, playfulness is non-negotiable. You have to be silly, you have to be embarrassing, you have to do silly things as much as possible. You want to dance to Bollywood song, you want to do crazy things, go out, have fun in whatever little capacity you can. Let's not get all serious about it. Let's be silly, let's be playful, or do nothing. Just do nothing. Just sit in front of a tree and just look at the tree. That's it. That's great.
Anurag, from you? To face what
you are not permitting me to talk about running.
No, feel free.
Yeah, well, if you let me talk about running, I think there is nothing like running, nothing at all. Maybe walking, I don't know, I've never tried it. So you can just get out. All of us live wherever we live. I think the one wonderful thing about the lockdown was that all roads were free. The Bangalore airport highway, I could run 20 kilometers one way and 20 kilometers back. But if you're not the kind for running, then I would suggest I've noticed that driving together is a very interesting detox. Huh? Because what happens is that let's say with my kids or with somebody, driving when you're inside a car, it forces you to actually be together. So just try it out. And I'm sure you've experienced it, but driving together long distances forces you to converse, forces you to be with each other. That's another interesting detox.
Great. So thank you, everyone. I think those were some good ideas, from cooking to running to driving. And I like Shelja's idea, do nothing, right? You just look out of your window, count the pigeons up in Gurgaon in a flat. I'm locked up on the 18th floor. So thank you so much for taking out time to be part of this webinar. I would also like to thank Taisi for partnering with us on this, and to all the audience members. We will make a snapshot of what was discussed, and we'll send a note out to all of you, capturing some of the key thoughts. Thank you, everyone, for being there. And yes, let's take the chill pill. Let's be optimistic. Let's get the best version of ourselves, like Mr. Kapur said, and try and help others get to their best version. Lovely interacting with you. Thank you once again. And hopefully in the series, in some other combination of a panelist, we'll have you again with your views on something else. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Good
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good connecting with everyone.
Bye. Bye.
All right.
Take care, and very well done, Gaurav. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.